Hello, I'm Michael Hirschman, and welcome to Building Bridges, that which unites us, a candid conversation about culture, democracy, and finding common ground. This week, I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Richard Firshein, a renowned board-certified physician with over 25 years of experience in integrative, anti-aging, and precision-based medicine. Dr. Firshein is the founder of New York City's Firshein Center for Integrative Medicine, where he has treated over 25,000 patients, blending traditional medicine with cutting-edge, high-tech approaches. His pioneering work has earned him recognition as a leading medical expert, featured on major networks like CNN, Fox, and CBS, and across pages of Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, People, and many, many more magazines. We've all heard it. The rising tide of unhappiness and dissatisfaction in today's world, it begs the question, how do we reclaim happiness and boost well-being, not just for longer lives, but for lives filled with purpose and happiness? Let's dive right in by my saying that last week I read an article about the World Happiness Index. It's done by Oxford University and Gallup, and they poll people in a variety of countries. And I was shocked to learn that the United States is number 24. Now, it's not surprising that we see greater happiness in Scandinavian countries, but above us are countries like Slovenia, Lithuania, Mexico, Costa Rica, and it's a little bit surprising that we're going down so fast and furious on this list. Every year we fall further and further. Interestingly enough, if you take out folks that in America that were polled over 30 years of age, if you remove them from this survey, we would have wound up number 64, which tells us that people under 30 in this country are feeling really insecure, feeling depressed, and frustrated. What's your take on this?
Well, from a medical point of view, happiness is a critical, and community is a critical part of the health equation. You know, we've had a lot of studies on this. Famous study, the Framingham study, which was originally done to determine whether cholesterol had an effect on heart disease, also delved into this issue around community. And they found that people that are unhappy, you know, the 6 degrees of separation story, they found that people that are unhappy can affect people 6 degrees of separation from them. So unhappiness is like a virus, and it builds from the community within. We also know that there are studies that show that happiness has a profound effect on longevity. So within that context, community, and this idea around happiness, what is happiness? But community is a very important part of happiness. So there are towns in the Midwest that have some of the highest levels of longevity, in part because the communities are so strong. If people have a problem, they reach out to their neighbor. You know, they meet at the diner on the weekend. They're not eating necessarily the healthiest food, but they are collectively creating a community that provides the underpinnings for happiness. And finally, you know, everybody's heard about blue zones at this point. There's a lot of controversy around certain parts of it, but studies have shown that happiness and satisfaction with your life and what that entails, and we can go into the details of what people think of in terms of happiness. But happiness is something that is a collective experience, and when communities are strong, happiness increases.
But there are people that live long and are
very unhappy. Yes. Well, I think those are people, you know, there are two kinds of people. There are people that make people happy, and there are people who make people unhappy. So I think that you can live a long time. There's another study that was done in hospitals. And again, this dividing line between happiness and people that maybe make other people unhappy is maybe a little bit subtle. But hospital studies have shown that people that are more demanding and make maybe the nursing staff more unhappy tend to live the longest and have the best outcomes. So I think there's a balancing act between all of these different factors and how it all plays out.
Well, we're going to go to the man on the street. We asked some folks about their level of happiness
interesting.
or unhappiness. But before I do that, it appears to me, as a layman, that unhappiness has been a growing culture in our country particularly. Do you have any feel for what might be causing that?
I do have my personal opinions because I think people have lost sight of the things that matter and what really creates happiness. There's a lot of factors: self-esteem. We talked about community, health. Those are underpinnings of what people perceive. But here, because I think we're so focused sometimes on external factors, what we have, what other people have, those kinds of things generate unhappiness. So the studies that we've seen, particularly, on teenagers and happiness, the more social media they're involved, the more unhappy they are. The more video games people play, the less happy they are, because there's a disconnect. When you're on a device, and for the first time we're on all of these devices all the time, when you're on a device, you're not connecting with somebody. And just the simple act, people go out to dinner, someone picks up the phone or they leave their phone on the table. All of these things create this subtle sense of disconnect. Somebody's elsewhere, somebody's not connected to me. So I think part of that reason that we're experiencing so much unhappiness is because we've disconnected from each other. And we are very much connected. There is a whole philosophical bridge that really discusses even the quantum world of how our cells and how we interact with the universe. When you're disconnected, you're not able to balance yourself. You're not able to find the things that are important in your life. You're not able to prioritize. And suddenly that call that comes in, there's nothing good that comes in on your phone usually. I mean, it's always something, it's a demand, it's a need, it's a request. There's something there that is not necessarily going to bring fulfillment or happiness. So I think we need to reprioritize, and people need to think about it. As we mature and get older, I think people need to understand there's a balancing act. And if we're focused on happiness and we're focused on the things that make us happy, we need to reprioritize the things that we think are important in our lives.
Work like crazy, everything's hustle and bustle. We don't take any time for ourselves. Emphasis is on work, it's not on family, it's not on self-time, it's not on self-care. That's just the way we do things here, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And do you think that social media has any factor in that as well?
I think
as a country, we're always growing up with a capitalistic mindset, so we have to work really hard, and a lot of people don't really have that balance, like I was saying. So
I think causes us to kind of get in that race of work to buy things, to work to buy things. And I feel like we spend a lot less time worrying about the things that truly matter. For example, when you travel to other countries, Europe in my mind specifically, you notice that the lifestyle is a lot different. They tend to prioritize enjoying their life or family versus the work culture.
I think a lot of stuff like social media and all that, people kind of get caught up and they just forget we only have a short time on Earth. You just gotta enjoy it while you're here.
Maybe because of the social climate, how everyone treats each other nowadays, it's just not right.
it's exacerbated everything, right? It's been a trend that's been happening over the years. And with, the emergence of technology, it's definitely exacerbated the problem.
I think that people spend a lot of times comparing themselves to others, and it's easy to forget that what we see is not always the truth. And so I absolutely think that social media has caused that to happen as well.
I want to buy everything on social media too, so it's hard to not want what people have, in influencers and everything.
Absolutely. There's a lot of influence, and you want to buy all this, and you see everybody getting all this, that you want to buy it, and then you don't have the money, so it kind of demotivates you. Mm-hmm. That's one thing.
Yeah, and we're always comparing ourselves to other people.
I agree with a lot of those comments. I think if you're getting sound bites and people are like, what do you think it is? And I'm unhappy with eggs, and I'm unhappy, with social media. And I alluded to it earlier, but I think, those tentacles run much deeper. And so you're in an echo chamber, once enough people are unhappy, they're all talking about being unhappy. It becomes like socially acceptable to be, in a sense, unhappy. People feel badly about feeling happy in this environment because they sense that they need to be challenged by what's around them rather than what's inside them. So I think part of the conversation is really that deeper sense of what it is over the millennia that people have gravitated to. We're not different. You know, we wear different clothes and we have different styles, but human beings are basically the same as they've been over thousands of years. We just, you know, our clothing looks different or our buildings look different, but people are people. And when we get into certain cycles, we gravitate towards those cycles. We could be, you know, extremely happy if we wanted to be. We could also be unhappy. Happiness is sort of a, you know, I think one of the things that, you know, in the American Constitution is, you know, pursuit of happiness. It didn't say you should be happy. It just said you should have the option to pursue happiness. I think people aren't pursuing it. They're actually pursuing something else. And I think, you know, gravitating towards things, you know, avoiding family, friends, and then the symptoms of that, you know, in how they manifest through social media and experiences that we've had over the last 10 years, which have really disconnected us. I know during the break we were talking about COVID, but it really has disconnected the population from each other, and it's caused profound fissures in, you know, our society because we weren't built to withstand that. You know, I think we're generally a society that's built on consumerism and more capital-intensive concepts, but there are other places with traditions that are that have held out for very long periods of time. And those traditions are, again, there for a reason. They give people anchors to hold on to when they are in difficult moments. You know, I remember stories from my immigrant grandparents. You know, they lived in small apartments. They had lots of people all around all the time. They were happy. Like, they talked about it like it was the Great Depression, but they had community, they had friends, they had family. It was tough. They had nothing. But yet, they had these memories of just this joyful environment that they lived in with nothing. So I think people are like, well, we need this. But yes, we do. I think we just have gotten used to maybe prioritizing one thing over another. And that has impacted people's health. I see it in my practice because I deal with a lot of different health issues. And one of them is just the sense of dissatisfaction that people have. It's not easy to fix, but I think people can do specific things to get to a better place. But those are some of the reasons why I think we're suffering as a society.
Doctor, I want to ask you about humor and how important humor is to your mental well-being.
You know, it's fascinating because humor is something that a lot of cultures incorporate, and some have no humor at all. But I think that humor plays such a critical part in decreasing stress. We know when we evaluate patients and when they laugh, we can see their stress hormones go down. It literally is the best medicine, and there's a saying, right? Laughter is the best medicine. But we've been able to document that, and we've been able to show that if you laugh and you see the light side of things, and you're by understanding humor, it indicates you have a deeper understanding of the problem itself. Because it's hard to make fun of something, it's hard to extract the peculiarities about a certain situation. But if you have humor, you've already shown that you do have that ability. And that already tells you that you've taken the first step towards diffusing anger, diffusing crises, bringing people closer together. It's a very human experience, right? Laughter is something, again, where else in the animal world is laughter a part of a communication skill? We know animals communicate, but joking and laughter are really particularly human traits.
So if we can invent a pill
to make us laugh,
gives a person a sense of humor,
yes,
it'd be a commercial success.
100%. And there are medications which do enhance or promote laughter, and also are being shown to have positive effects on mental health. So we are.
Look, I mean,
we are
you
getting
can't
there.
say that without going into a little bit more detail, because our listeners right now are writing down what medication they should order.
Well, they can't order this one, and I'm. When we go through these things in medicine, sometimes we're like, maybe this isn't the right time to talk about it. But I will tell you, there are studies done on nitrous oxide, which is laughing gas, the kind of thing that you go to the dentist, right? As one of the options. But it's under review now, because it does make people laugh, but it is being shown to be a potential treatment for depression.
Let's talk about your practice for a moment. Obviously, you started your medical career in a traditional fashion. You went through medical school. Let me back up and ask, when was it you decided to become a doctor?
It was always in my consciousness to be a doctor. I think as a tradition, in my family, there were other medical professionals and doctors in my family. I gravitated towards that. But at a very early age, I had exposure to a lot of health problems, both personally and within my family. I lost very dear friends, neighbors to different problems and diseases. And I was challenged myself with asthma, which I wrote a book called Reversing Asthma about my experiences with it and how I overcame that. But I gravitated towards it because I was unhappy at a very early age with the way that people were being treated, my family, my friends, the losses. I saw what was happening. I said, there's something very wrong with this system of healthcare. It wasn't based on wellness. It wasn't based on anything that I felt, even as a young boy, was helpful. And I also wanted to practice medicine. It was very meaningful to me. I looked at other things to do. My parents weren't necessarily encouraging that. They knew it was a hard road to go down. But I was committed to not just medicine, but the change that needed to happen. And it's what drives me forward to this day. I haven't changed that perspective or that desire or that intensity from my first days thinking about medicine till today. I still have that same excitement, same enthusiasm every day about it.
But you had changed, because you began, as I said, with traditional medicine, and now you're more on the side of wholeness, on the side of...
With what I had available to me, I used. Like within our household, interesting story. So my mother had breast cancer. She didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't know that there was anything serious about her cancer. But later on, 25 years after she had cancer, and she was still alive, she had metastatic breast cancer, my father told me that when she had checked in for the hospital, she was in a lot of pain. And I got a review from the radiologist. They said, your mother's got a very serious problem. And I called my father. I said, we have a problem. And he said, I need to talk to you. And I said, well, what is it? He sits me down and he's like, look, I haven't told you this, but 25 years ago, your mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. She said she wouldn't go through any other treatment. Surgeon was a friend. We agreed not to tell her. So she only had, at that point, a 5-year survival, supposedly. But she didn't, in a sense, know that there was a problem. So she just continued her way, and we changed. Like, we started eating differently. We used to, whenever there was, if we could get organic food, or if we could, eat. Suddenly, I went from waffles to Brussels sprouts. So I was already kind of getting immersed in this holistic vision, and my desire to learn more about medicine changed over time too. I was always thinking about it, but we just didn't have enough information to make the full switch. That did change dramatically after I got sick with asthma. I was hospitalized with it and had a very severe problem, intensive care, the whole thing. And then I realized, I said, whatever we've been doing, I knew there was a problem, but whatever we've been doing, I needed to heal myself now. And that's when I really made the big leap into what was called alternative medicine at the time. I studied acupuncture, Chinese medicine, immersed myself in supplements and dietary changes and a lot of different, holistic therapies. So yes, I did make I had a slow, and then I needed to make a very dramatic change in my life, which I did. And at that point, I what I would say cleaned everything up.
So waffles to Brussels sprouts sounds like a good name for a book.
I'll keep that in mind. We could write it together.
Someone who comes to you and let's say in their 60s and is medically healthy, and look, unless you're living in a cave today somewhere in the world, you know that better eating and exercise is good for you. In fact, if you're living in a cave, you probably eat better and exercise more.
Yes.
So we already know that. But someone coming to you in their 60s that wants to do more to ensure a healthy and longer life, what is the sort of advice or treatment that you might recommend?
I mean, depending on the individual, some people really want that deep dive, which I recommend because people have neglected their health for so long that they know more about, their mortgages and their insurance policies than they do about what they need inside, what their bodies need. So first thing we do is a very deep dive in terms of laboratory testing. And I check everything. It could be supplement levels, metabolic tests, full comprehensive blood work, allergy testing, and then I'll even look at things like stool tests, urine, saliva, depending on what that person needs. Some people don't need all of those tests. Some people really need a deep understanding of what it is that is going on inside their body. And once you look at it, once you look at someone's tests and things that nobody has checked, like I'm still surprised, 2025, someone comes into the office, the doctor's never checked their level of heavy metals. They've never looked at mercury. They've never looked at lead or arsenic. They haven't taken a deep dive in breaking down their lipid levels. They haven't done a lipoprotein A test, for instance, which is a very small cholesterol molecule that gets inside the blood vessels and causes a substantial amount of damage, particularly for left main artery disease. So, and then I'll look at allergies. 20% of adults have allergies. It's an epidemic that we've been witnessing of people with, and we didn't hear about it when we were kids, people with allergies. Now it's a huge problem. There are a lot of potential reasons for that, but understanding what people can eat and what they can't eat, what their genetic history is. All of those tests give you a fundamental understanding. And finally now we have the ability to do tests which look at biological aging. We can look at organ systems and see the same kinds of tests that we use, let's say if there was an unfortunate situation and we need to determine how old someone was that passed away. We can do specific epigenetic tests which are tests that look at what's happened above the genes, what damage has happened to the genes. We can look at those epigenetic tests and determine somebody's age. What we've done now is we've taken those tests and we've incorporated them into living healthy or unhealthy human beings and see where their biological age is, and then we can institute changes that reverse that aging process. So I just finished a study with a dozen patients, and I've been tracking my patients over time and have watched their age reverse, go backwards by making changes in their diet, in their supplements, monitoring their exercise, using wearables, all of these different factors, and we are able now to reverse aging. So when someone comes into my practice, something that we couldn't do 10 years ago even, is we can take someone and put them on treatment, because I'm not saying that we just use supplements. Someone needs medication. Some of the newer drugs like these GLP-1 drugs, Mounjaro, Ozempic, those have been godsends for a number of my patients in terms of reducing risk for heart disease and diabetes. reducing their blood pressure. I've seen all kinds of incredible benefits from that. So we have some genuine anti-aging drugs now that we didn't have before. So
I just want to make sure I understand. You're not talking about you were being able to bring me back to the year that I should have brought Microsoft in. and I want...
man, that would be great.
Wouldn't that be great?
Fantastic idea.
Some guy comes in, a man or woman, 65 years old. You do all these tests, some traditional, some a little less traditional. And you find out that that person's biological age is 80. How do you break that news to them?
It's tough. I mean, people do get, everyone, let me put it this way. Because I am a hopeful person and have seen so many good results, I don't have patients when they come into me who get older. So I don't have any results where someone has come in and their biological age has gotten worse. So I can tell them that no matter where you are, we're going to keep moving the needle backwards. And we're just going to keep doing it year after year until they catch up to their actual age, or maybe they're able to surpass it. So I think there's I'm very hopeful. If somebody comes in and they're 80 biologically, but chronologically they're 65, I'm glad they've come to me. I feel like there's a lot that we can do now that we couldn't do. As I said, 10 years ago, we didn't have any of these technologies, peptides, these medications, these anti-aging treatments.
What is peptides? People may not know what.
So one of the big advances over the last, 10 years is this new area of medicine called peptides. And peptides, Ozempic is actually a peptide. These are molecules that are not as big as a traditional hormone, which would be over 100 amino acids. Peptides are smaller molecules that you could think of as building blocks. So if you take a peptide and you add another peptide to it, maybe some other molecules, you'll create something out of it. Maybe growth hormone, maybe testosterone, maybe a different neurotransmitter. So these peptides do have biological activity. And often what they do is stimulate your own body's ability to repair and replicate. So let's take a peptide like sermorelin, which is a precursor for growth hormone releasing hormone. Okay, so what it does is it stimulates your own body's release of growth hormone. You don't necessarily want to give people growth hormone because it will suppress their own, and it may increase the risk of other problems, even cancer. So we try not to use the actual molecule because we don't want to suppress it. But when we can get you to make more of it, you're not giving someone something to make less. You're giving something so their body can make more. And so a peptide is a building block. 50 amino acids combined together that can create, when combined with other molecules, the substrate that can go forward. You can almost think of it like a deficiency. Like maybe your body isn't able to make a certain product, like a neurotransmitter or hormone, but peptides are able to stimulate that for people that need them. So I use it for patients who have, let's say, chronic fatigue, long COVID, people that have run out of options. Those are great candidates for it. People that are suffering with premature aging, they may be great candidates for it as well.
Let's go back to the elephant in the room. We kept hearing from the man on the street, social media. Now look, you mentioned your grandparents.
No social media, right.
No social media. When I grew up, we had dinner every night in my house, and we talked about
everything,
the day.
And you had to.
Yeah, and
it was required to discuss.
Social media was growing over time, obviously, in the last 20 years. Then COVID hit. And there was an explosion of social media, in large part because people had nothing better to do. Yeah. And so I don't think we're ever going to recapture those olden times when people were happier. And I'm not sure that, I've talked to a lot of parents. My children are grown now, but a lot of parents who have young children are frightened to death of social media and the impact it has on their lives. They see and feel that their children have a sense of loneliness, although they're fully enjoying social media, the effects of it seem to be adverse. Where are we heading here, and what can we do to reverse it?
Yeah, we're in uncharted water. The problems, there are issues with social media just from the point of view of looking at a screen, eye strain and mental health issues and radiation. There are just problems with your phone to begin with. But the real, as you said, the elephant in the room is social media itself and how it impacts people at different parts of their lives. So when you're more vulnerable, you're going to be more vulnerable to what happens on social media. And the things that happen on social media might be great. If you're the person that everyone admires and you're the focus of everyone's attention and you have lots of followers, it could be a tremendous boost to your morale and how you perceive yourself. But for most people who go on, they're not that person. And so they end up in this vortex of need and want and desire, and then they experience all of the negative emotions that people have when they feel those things, right? When you have something, you don't have something someone else has. There's also bullying. There's a lot of studies around it. It is interesting. There may be some, people are now trying to break down social media by age, by sex, and they are finding some differences. Some people, as I said, do very well. Like in social media, they've found that women are, while girls are having difficulty with it, women are using it more for traditional, a traditional addition to communication, right? So they're using it to communicate. They're using it as a marketplace. They're sharing things, and men, on the other hand, are finding that typically in less social environments, they're finding it more difficult within that context. So you do have this split right now that's going on. But the aggregate of it is unhealthy because you still want society to function as a whole. We're not trying to break it down into, categories or ages or sexes. We're really trying to get society to function because that's one of the great inventions, right, of humanity, right? We've created civilization, and the idea of civilization is community, right? It's not living separately. The big idea was, hey, why don't we all get together and we can form this collective that works together for the common good. And all these advances that have happened over these centuries because we have been able to work together. Part of the problem with, again, social media is it tears at that fabric some way, and we really haven't figured out how to manage this problem. And coming out of COVID, it was an important point you made because, we're talking about, a catastrophe in so many ways, right? It was not just a poorly managed and poorly handled international crisis, but you also had these echo chamber that was developing around social media, and that created more of again, where websites and places that we frequent would then start to target you with news or things that were interesting to you. So it's like you were just talking in your head, like you would hear something, nobody was giving you a new idea, no one was giving you a new perspective. It was just like, oh, I want to hear about that. Okay, here's what you want to hear about that. And so we never heard other people's opinions. I mean, one of the ways that people communicate is through understanding. Like, I may disagree with you, but I understand you. That has to be a sentence, one sentence has to follow the other in order for people to get along and to communicate. If you say to somebody, I don't understand what you're saying and I hate you, it's like you're never going to create community, and that's going to lead to dissatisfaction and disconnection. And we see that within families. People get together for holidays because they're politically different. They have trouble communicating, or they won't communicate. People break up friendships over things like politics, where there has to be room for common ground and communication in order for people to feel happy right? Because these are the people in your lives that you love, and now suddenly you're judging them by one piece of a puzzle rather than the entire. And I think that did come out of COVID.
But even beyond the sense of happiness or unhappiness, the experts today, or some experts today, are saying we are facing in our country a mental health crisis. That takes it to a whole new level. Why are we facing this mental health crisis, if there is one, in our country?
I think we are kind of, at the seams. I think we are experiencing more mental health issues now. And I think it's the aggregate, again, taking it to all these extremes. If you, let's say just from my perspective, and I don't look at myself and say I have, every answer, but from a doctor's view, I look at my patients and I might delve into things like, how are they, with their family, their personal lives, their best, most important relationships? What can they do to create some foundation? If they don't have that foundation, how can they proceed? But from a medical point of view, if you don't feel well, and a lot of people are sick, they did a study where they said, they asked people how many, do you feel you're healthy, okay? And so 90% of people were like, yeah, I'm pretty healthy. And then they asked them, well, do you have any medical problems? And 90% of people said, yeah, I have a lot of medical problems, or I have some medical problems. So we're walking around unhealthy in the sense of not feeling well. Not feeling well is a bad way to start a day. If you don't feel like you have energy, if your stomach hurts, if you get constant migraines, if you're going for surgery, if you have to go get a root canal, whatever you're doing, that increases the misery factor as a foundational problem. So from a health point of view, it's hard to be happy when you're not feeling well, but you might think you're happy or you might think you're healthy because you're taking 4 or 5 different medications and you don't notice what you had before, but they have side effects. And so many people now are on medications for pain relief, depression. There have been studies, again, that have shown that drugs like Tylenol, which reduce pain, also reduce feeling. So it reduces your ability to connect. If you're taking a drug like lorazepam, which has become a popular topic at the moment, but if you're taking drugs to numb you, you're not going to be able to experience your life. If you're taking antidepressants, if you need them, it's fine. But we have to understand that in order to get people to feel well, we have to understand that health plays a critical foundational role in the overall scheme of what makes people thrive. And then from there, we really do have to think about, as a society, how we're going to reverse this process and bring people closer together, let people know that things are okay. I think we do have to come from another viewpoint. And I do that in my practice because I know if I have somebody who's not motivated, is unhappy, it's the first part of the process for me that says they're going to get through this. If I have somebody who's in denial, or if I have somebody that doesn't understand that there's an option, they're less likely to succeed because they don't feel there's any hope or direction. They're just there because someone told them to come there.
Okay, so let's not talk about people. Let's talk about doctors.
Okay.
Now, that's not to suggest that doctors are on people. But the healthcare system in this country is under attack. Not long ago, we saw an executive of a pharmaceutical company shot and killed in the streets. A lot of doctors that I talk to these days wish they hadn't gone into the medical profession. It's become a difficult way to earn a living. The insurance industry is complicated, and there's so much paperwork involved that they are simply frustrated.
Right.
Is there any hope for the healthcare industry in this country?
Well, if I'm an example of what I would call hope, it is that doctors, I'm a very one-on-one practitioner, right? So I take care of my patients, I listen to them, And I find a great deal of satisfaction understanding my patients' lives and knowing a lot about, traditionally, this old, when I went to medical school, there was a saying, you can know how a patient's feeling by the knock on the door. It's like listening to people and how they are getting through their day-to-day lives makes a huge impact. So as a doctor, I tell young professionals getting into this that you need to change your perspective. If you're going to practice medicine, medicine is an art and a science. You can't you can corporatize some aspects of it because there are inefficiencies in medicine and they should be drawn out. But what's happened is that we have an artificial system. So the way we diagnose, the coding system, I think there are something like 68,000 different medical conditions according to the World Health Organization. It's really not that complicated. I mean, there are 68,000 variations, it's true, but most people have like 10, that's 95% of it. And of those, understanding where they come from, helping people to get through it, and letting doctors treat their patients, letting them get back to being the person that they went into medicine in the first place, which was to help people and not to push paper and not to have a lot of restrictions by insurance companies who deny what the doctors are saying they need to do for their clients. So I think we have a lot of structural issues in medicine that need to be fixed. But I think there's hope on the other side because of all this new information and changes, and that doctors can, and I tell this to doctors, you can get excited about your practice because there are tools now to help people to reverse their health issues and to give them hope. So I think that that's, part of it. But structurally, yeah, if you wanted to create a system where you gave people a lot of, even think about it as a business person. If you gave people a lot of nonsense to do, are highly trained, have spent a decade or more just training, and then have been working at their profession for decades more. And then you just say, well, I want to slow that down. Let's give them a lot of paperwork to do. That ought to take care of half of it. And then when they want to treat a patient, let's make sure we deny it so they need to fill out more paperwork to get their patients taken care of. The doctors I know want to help people. Noble profession. Some of the smartest people I know. But everyone is frustrated by this. But I think there's, for me, the one way to deal with it is to reconnect with patients the way traditional doctors did for the last millennia, which is one-on-one, learn about, the person who's in front of you, and understand what their specific needs are.
So it sounds like you're not disappointed that you didn't become a rocket scientist.
I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm good.
Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a fascinating conversation and one that needs to be continued because the health of the nation, the mental well-being of the people in the nation are what's going to lead us to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
As we close today's episode of Building Bridges, that which unites us, I'm reminded of how closely our health, happiness, and sense of community are intertwined. By encouraging open conversations about our well-being, we can better understand each other and create a stronger, more connected world. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Richard, for your insights, your intelligence, your dedication to the medical profession, and your pursuit of happiness. Thank you for joining us today. With every conversation, we have the opportunity to build bridges, that which unites us.